Hello and welcome everyone. This is your astrology forecast for full moon in Aquarius that is happening on the 29th of July. And this one is pretty revolutionary, rebellious, futuristic, innovative, unique, unconventional, sudden, awakening, transformative, and very self-confronting. We will be confronting ourselves in a huge way, all of us collectively, because at the same time we have some other big collective shifts that are happening. So at the same time of full moon in Aquarius, which is together with Pluto, in conjunction with Pluto, the Lord of Transformation, the ruler of Scorpio and 8th house. So this full moon in Aquarius, together with Pluto, in opposition, of course, with the Sun, because full moon is when the Sun and the Moon are looking at each other, they are in opposition. And it's also in exact opposition with Jupiter in Leo. And Jupiter just started its journey through Leo and will be there for one whole year. So it's in its initiatory phase still. So we have this very strong activation of Aquarius and Leo axis. And I'm not talking now only about full moon and opposition with Jupiter, Aquarius, Leo, but 3 days before this full moon, on the 26th of July, we have nodal shifts happening. So we had the North Node in Pisces last 18 months and the South Node in Virgo. And now we have the North Node moving into Aquarius from Pisces and the South Node moving into Leo. So we will be confronted with a lot of themes of Aquarius and Leo, and I'll talk more about this. And I cannot talk about this and not mentioning, of course, the age of Aquarius, and I will try to give the perspective of, I hope, authentic astrology viewpoint and my own perspective. So entering all this new chapter, so we are definitely closing some chapters. So we have the North Node getting out of Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and the South Node moving out from Virgo. And Virgo and Pisces are a lot about healing and karmic cycles, karmic releases. So we are definitely ending something big collectively, some big healing chapter, and we are moving into the future. We are moving into something different, into something innovative, into something that really asks us to remember what it means to be a human being. And this is one of the oldest questions. The greatest mystery is a human being. We are our own greatest mystery, and this full moon is an initiation into this transformation of our identity and of who we are as human beings collectively and individually. So, you know, one of the oldest ideas in all traditions, spiritual traditions, esoteric traditions, occult traditions, astrology, you know, one of the oldest ideas is that human being is far more than just a physical body. And I think we all agree, especially nowadays. I mean, we are definitely much more than this physical body. And the ancient Egyptians, the Hermetic philosophers, the Neoplatonists, the Kabbalists, the Indian rishis, you know, all these spiritual traditions describe the human being as being that exists on several levels at once, because we are multi-layered beings, definitely. And we have a body that can be touched, we have emotions that can be felt, we have thoughts that come and go, but there is also something that we cannot explain logically, that we cannot, you know, put into some concrete definition or language. And we know this as a soul. many traditions call this part of us a soul, or consciousness, spirit, life force, presence, call it as you will. And ancient astrologers never saw the planets as some distant objects that are influencing us from somewhere far away beyond the sky. They understood them as living principles within the human psyche. And this is what truly these I don't know what to call them, energies, planets, functions, call it as you will, as I already said. And, you know, for example, because the ruler of this full moon in Aquarius is Saturn, but also Uranus. Saturn is an ancient ruler of Aquarius, and Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, but they are both very equally important and valid for Aquarius. That's why Aquarius is often very misunderstood sign and misunderstood archetype within us all. And it carries very, very complex principles. And for example, Saturn is not an old man sitting in heavens sending lessons and hardships into people's lives. Or, you know, Uranus is not just the planet of rebellion. Pluto, which is in conjunction with this full moon, is not just about destruction. You know, they are archetypal forces that already exist within us, right? And astrology really becomes meaningful the moment we stop imagining these planets as some external powers, and we start recognizing them as some different dimensions of our own consciousness. And, you know, we carry whole constellations within us, and it's very important to become aware of all these things now that we are entering into the next 18 months of having the North Node in Aquarius and South Node in Leo. It will be very important to be as human as we can be and able to express ourselves, to reconnect with the joy through the South Node in Leo, to reconnect with that innocence that we lost somewhere along the way because we had to learn many methods and programs in order to grow up and survive in this world. But now we are moving into this new cycle, and the next 18 years we are creating something very important. And during this full moon in Aquarius, those dimensions become very visible because the relationship between Saturn, Uranus and Pluto, they are deeply activated, and together they describe growing up, waking up, and allowing the false self to fall away. And during the 19th century, there was a concept that has almost disappeared from everyday conversations, and it's called animal magnetism. And this was the physician called Mesmer, and he believed that an invisible life force flows through every living being, and that this force is connecting people to one another in ways that is very difficult to explain through ordinary observation and communication. So his theories were eventually rejected as scientific explanations, and many of his conclusions didn't survive. But even today we still describe certain energies and people as magnetic, and this animal magnetism is a substance that is very important for our relationship with the spirit. And you know, we say someone has an extraordinary presence, or we speak about chemistry between people, or you know, we enter a certain space and we can immediately feel the energy and the atmosphere of it. So all these things are very, very powerful to that are, because they are really coming to life. They are in our face now, and human beings have always felt that there is something beyond this visible realm, beyond what we are experiencing with our body, with our senses. There is something more, and Aquarius is, this energy of Aquarius is here to show us this, to reveal some of that mystery to us, if we are willing to hear it, to feel it, to heal it, to sense it, to admit it, and to allow ourselves to change. Because, you know, we are the change. The revolution starts from within. So we are, I know for many people, this can be scary, because we think that we have to change some things on the outside, these external revolutions. I am not saying that we should just lie down and do nothing, but we have to work in both worlds, and the real revolution can never happen if we don't work on it within ourselves. So this is truly a very personal revolution, and with Pluto here, we won't be able to hide. We cannot hide what is fake within us. We cannot hide what is preventing us from really living our authentic selves. And this can be painful, because in order to live our authentic selves, we will have to allow our fake personalities to die. And Pluto is not, many people relate Pluto only to death and dying and something dark and negative, but Pluto really wants the truth. And in order for this truth to come to life, many false things have to fall away. So we never communicate only through words, right? We communicate through our presence, through body language, through unconscious expectations, through emotional memory, through beliefs that we may not even be aware of that we are carrying. So, you know, two people can say exactly the same sentence, and they can leave completely different impressions, because human beings don't listen only with their ears. And, you know, we listen with our entire being. And this full moon wants to reveal what we radiate. And this is one of those periods when many of us may hear ourselves saying, this is just who I am. You know, that's just who I am. This is what I'm like. But Pluto asks, is it really? Is it really? Are you sure about that? Is it really who you are? Is it really that you are like that? And, you know, it may be one of the most uncomfortable questions we ever encounter, because if we are not who we believed ourselves to be, then who exactly are we? And this is where we come to the key point of meeting ourselves. And it can be pretty uncomfortable, but during this time of this full moon, the modern ruler of Aquarius, which is Uranus, is making a harmonious trine with this full moon and with Pluto. So this brings some surprising moments and sudden shifts that we couldn't see coming, that are actually positive for us, that are actually good for us, that are not bringing chaos, but actually they are bringing clarity. So we may surprise ourselves. And Uranus is in Gemini, so our voice is very important. What we speak, what we say, how we think, our opinion, these things may suddenly change in a very good way for us. These are, you know, positive surprises that bring transformation through something uncomfortable. And this is where I think the shadow of Aquarius becomes very fascinating, because, you know, we stop searching for truth and we start searching for confirmation that we were right all along. You know, this is what this full moon with Pluto will confront us with. We are about to see, are we just searching for confirmation of who we believe we are, or are we truly searching for truth and authenticity? You know, we can just think about how often this happens in relationships. You know, we argue not because we want to understand the other person, but because we want to win. the argument. We want to be right. We want to prove our point. And this is some ugly truth that we all may be faced with. And all we need is to admit it and to allow the change to happen. You know, we listen, we don't listen to hear the other person, but mostly we listen to prepare our reply. Or, you know, we ask questions because, not because we really want to hear what the other person has to say, but because we already believe we know the answer. And Aquarius can, this energy of Aquarius can become very dogmatic, you know, while believing it's the most open-minded person in the room. So let's all pay attention to how we behave with others. You know, Aquarius is also groups of people, communities, group thinking, how we feel amongst others within the community. And the communities are about to change the way we come together, the way we do relationships, the way we communicate with each other, the way we perceive other people. This is all now starting to change really deeply. And you know, Pluto has very little patience for that kind of illusion that Aquarius part in us may want us to believe now, that we are the most open-minded person within that community. And Pluto, as I said, doesn't have patience for that kind of illusion, and Pluto is not interested in protecting our identity. Pluto is interested in truth, and only in truth. And this is why this period may expose something that many of us would rather escape and avoid. So we often notice other people's blind spots much more easily than our own, right? Or, you know, it is one of the most universal characteristics of human psychology. And, you know, we recognize another person's ego much faster than we recognize our own. And, you know, we notice someone else's need for control and we are unaware of our own attempts to control situations. We complain that others never truly listen while we are interrupting them before they have finished what they wanted to say. So we may be faced with our own hypocrisy, with our own lies, with our need to be seen, to be praised, to be seen and treated as king or queen, because the South Node in Leo, the shadow side of this, may be confronting our egocentric behavior, our perspective that we are the best, that we earn respect of others, that, you know, we may have a need to overpower others, to overshine others, because Jupiter is also in Leo, so this can bring expansion of this need. But the higher expression of Leo energy in Jupiter in Leo is definitely to expand our ability to enjoy, to expand our ability to reconnect with the child within us, to expand the ability to see the funny side of our egocentric behavior, and all of these things that I spoke about already. So, you know, maybe one of our greatest weaknesses is that we experience ourselves from the inside and everyone else from the outside. And, you know, we know our intentions, but we only see other people's behavior. And when we speak about ourselves, we say, I didn't mean it that way, or look what they did, or, you know, all these things are really going to show us where we are being totally blind. And, you know, these misunderstandings may come to life in a strong way, especially in our relationships, and also in our in love relationships, in many other forms of unions, because we also have, at the same time of this full moon, we have the square between Venus and Mars, between two lovers in the zodiac, between masculine and feminine, and this masculine and feminine is within us. It's not about gender, it's about the masculine and feminine principles that we all carry. And Venus is in Virgo, and Mars is in Gemini. So we are about to be faced with this need to explain our feelings, to categorize them, to analyze them, and we may cut people with our words. Sharp tongue, Mars in Gemini. So these conflicts and confrontations may be much stronger than usual, but this is all helping us see where we are faking it, where we believe our lies, where we have inherited beliefs that we are like this or like that. You know, I'm like that. And as I said, Pluto will say, are you really? Is that true? And this full moon may show us this kind of mechanism. You know, what do we actually expect from other people? Do we expect them to understand us without explanation? Do we expect them to validate our worldview? Do we expect them to heal wounds that they didn't create? This is big. This is very big and very important, and this is something we will be faced with in the future. You know, are we expecting other people to treat our wounds, to treat the wounds that they never created? And can we take responsibility for these wounds? Saturn in Aries. You know, take responsibility for who we are. And do we expect other people to never disappoint us? Do we expect them to choose us every single time? Many of these expectations have very little to do with the other person, and they reveal the parts of ourselves that are searching for safety, for comfort, for stability, for attention, you know, for attention, Leo energy, searching for attention, and we may be faced with that need strongly. And I spoke about this already in previous video when I talked about new moon in Cancer. And this is all, these energies are never separate, like they are all up connecting with each other. And the next lunation, we are going to have a new moon solar eclipse in Leo on the 12th of August. And this is already felt. We are already in eclipse season. And many things are happening during this time. Many, many powerful things, collectively and individually. And we definitely have to take some responsibility for how human are we. You know, are we really human or are we hypocrites? And, you know, no one is going to be spared from this experience. As I said, Pluto doesn't care for, you know, how Pluto doesn't really care for what we believe in. It wants the truth. And having this opposition with Jupiter in Leo, it can go into extremes. You know, Jupiter expands everything it touches. So this can be some very big transformation of our identity. And it may not happen overnight, even though it can, because Uranus is in the game, so sudden things can happen, you know, snap decisions, sudden insights, awakenings, but it's gonna also take the time. Aquarius has a lot to do with time because the ruler is Saturn, and Uranus also has a lot to do with time. But I won't go that deeply into that story now, maybe in some other video. But you know, this is where Leo and Aquarius meet each other. Leo longs to be seen, and Aquarius longs to be understood. And, you know, everything we carry within ourselves eventually begins to flow toward everyone around us. And as I said, this is the evolution of me. And Aquarius is an air sign. Aquarius is an air sign, the last air sign in the zodiac. It's transpersonal. And why? So, you know, the question is, Aquarius is the water bearer. So where does water come from with this air sign? And that is one of, you know, very powerful riddles in astrology, because Aquarius has never actually represented water as an element. It represents the transmission of life, the flow, the power. The water here is not just an element, it's the knowledge that is being poured onto others. And you know, Aquarius is strongly related to Prometheus, the one who brings the truth. The luminiferous ether. Ether is very strongly related to Aquarius because we have Uranus as the ruler, you know, the electricity, and Saturn is the time. So it's very, very powerful, very much related to ether, and with air and water as the source of memory and life. And water becomes the symbol here. Air is invisible, and water makes the invisible visible. And you know, we cannot see the wind, but we can feel it. We know it exists because, you know, we can see leaves moving, you know, but we cannot see consciousness in the same way. We only know it exists because we can see that human beings change. And Aquarius belongs to air because it rules ideas, intellect, perception, language, knowledge, collective consciousness. So ether is not just some pseudoscience. It's actually mythology and philosophy and physics. And you know, the Greeks, for example, the Greeks spoke about 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. Ether isn't just another substance. And for example, Aristotle described it as incorruptible essence that goes beyond the moon. It's the substance from which the heavens themselves are formed. And also the ancient Indians spoke of Akasha, and we know about Akashic records, but a lot of these self-proclaimed teachers and gurus, they changed the terminology and the meaning, but there is a true meaning. And living in this day and age, it's our responsibility to do something with all the knowledge that is given to us, that we have access to, because now we truly have access, and there is no excuse for not knowing and for not using that knowledge for the right cause and not for some manipulation or abuse of power. And you know, this ether is also known as quintessence, and medieval alchemists, they all searched for this 5th element and 5th essence. So you know, reality is not composed only of our senses, of what senses can perceive. There is always something more subtle, something that cannot be touched, but that shapes everything that we experience. And you know, many physicists in the past believed that light traveled through something that is called luminiferous ether. And then came something else into the story. I won't go into that now, but you know, the modern science changed completely the concept of physics and just confused everyone and everything, and we lost touch with some real knowledge, but we are coming back to it now. And empty space is anything but empty. And we may be reaching that space within us. You know, emptiness is actually initiation into ourselves. And just like nightmares are actually a very powerful tool and our own way of cleansing and healing and initiation into meeting ourselves. And you know, the universe continues revealing layers and layers that remain invisible to our ordinary perception. So astrology and physics are asking these different questions, but they both continue showing and pointing towards the same mystery, that this reality is far more mysterious and far stranger than what it appears to be. And if, you know, for example, if Saturn is structure, Uranus is electricity. And electricity is really fascinating because we never actually see electricity itself. We only witness its effects. And, you know, a light suddenly turns on. A heart is beating. Thoughts are appearing and disappearing. You know, billions of neurons are communicating through tiny electrical impulses every second. You know, our whole nervous system is electrical. And, you know, Uranus is much more than just rebelliousness. Uranus is really about awakening. And, you know, this is a flash of recognition, a signal. And we may all receive some signal now that shows us where we are being in deception with ourselves, especially because this North Node is moving out from the Pisces. We are now definitely faced with our self-illusionary and self-deceptive ways of being and living. So, you know, if Uranus resembles electricity, Pluto is more like a gravity. And gravity never asks for any permission. It just pulls, it gathers, it reshapes everything that enters its field. So Pluto is really more like a psychological gravity, and the deeper we descend, because Pluto is the descension, the deeper we descend into ourselves, the stronger this pull becomes. And this is why Pluto rules the unconscious layers of who we are. And we often imagine that we make decisions freely, but Pluto really asks if we are choosing our lives or if we are just repeating inherited emotional patterns. And, you know, what exactly is a human being? Not biologically, but existentially. You know, through the history, we have this word anthropos that is used to describe the human being, and in many traditions, humanity is understood as the bridge between the heaven and earth. You know, not above nature, not separate from nature, but right in the middle of it. And we are beings that are really capable of wondering where consciousness itself comes from. These are some really crucial questions. These are not some abstract collective questions. These questions become essential for our personal path, for what we do with our life, for where is our soul? Is it trapped somewhere within the layers of our egocentric behaviors and forms and programs? Is our soul trapped there? Is our true self trapped somewhere inside? And this is something that will start coming up. You know, we can see that all around us, the whole nature is not anxious about knowing anything. It just knows things because it's strongly connected to it. And, you know, maybe the whole energy, the consciousness itself became human because so that it can observe itself. And we often hear that humanity is entering this age of Aquarius, and I think that most people are missing the point, because I hear that everyone is talking only about advanced technology, artificial intelligence, futurism, I don't know, some very advanced way of living and innovation, like digital networks and some crazy ways of using all the tools and devices. But this isn't the deepest meaning of this age at all. You know, maybe the age of Aquarius is actually the age of responsibility for knowledge. And I don't know, I mean, we all have to agree that this right now is a period when we as humanity are possessing so much information. And, you know, we carry entire libraries into our pockets, right? And but the question is, does our consciousness evolve at the same speed as this technology does? You know, knowledge can easily turn into manipulation, and technology can easily turn into power struggles, into need for domination, and all this information, because we definitely have to say that we live in the age of information. All this information and data that we have are causing anxiety and feeling like we are always missing something. And this is not something bad, because it's definitely leading us somewhere further. It's leading us, maybe some of us, towards a despair. And this despair will actually inspire us to dig deeper beneath the superficial information. And if information doesn't lead to transformation, it's dead information, and it can only make us more confused and more hungry for empty information. So the wisdom of transforming wounds into compassion is the point of the use of knowledge. And you know, we are now able to choose the truth instead of avoiding it. You know, what it means to participate intentionally in the evolution of humanity. What does it truly mean to participate in the evolution of humanity? You know, what kind of water bearer am I? What kind of water am I bearing and carrying? And I have a feeling that this full moon is not asking us to improve ourselves, but, you know, to initiate ourselves into something different, into a different way of seeing who we are, into being totally honest about who we are. Again, I said, Pluto will ask us, are you really sure that this is who you are? Are you really sure that this is yours? That when you say, this is who I am, this is my way, this is how I act, this is how I react, this is who I really am, Pluto will ask, is it really? Does it really resemble the truth? And, you know, we imagine that transformation is perhaps to become better, stronger, wiser, more successful, more spiritual, but Pluto is not interested in that kind of improvement. Pluto is interested in authenticity, and it will remove everything that doesn't belong to who we are. And it can feel like loss, it can feel like freedom, depending on our personal also chart, personal story, personal level of responsibility. And it can feel like both, like loss and freedom at the same time. And this Aquarius energy is often very misunderstood, and people can reduce it to rebelliousness, eccentricity, innovation, humanitarian ideals, but those are expressions, but it's not truly the heart of Aquarius. The heart of Aquarius is consciousness. It's one of the only 3 human signs in the whole zodiac, besides Gemini and Virgo. And it's the most transpersonal of them. So it really has a deep impact on the whole world that we see around us. So Aquarius part in us asks us to step outside inherited identities, inherited beliefs, inherited fears, and inherited loyalties as well. And to see where we are blind with who we are. And the whole symbolism is really powerful when we think of Aquarius as this water bearer. And the water bearer doesn't drink the water, he carries it, and the water is meant for others. and it represents wisdom, knowledge, consciousness, healing, insight, you know, something that flows through a person and that doesn't truly belong to them. But so we are carrying this for others. That's why Aquarius is related to humanitarian ideals and to community, because it involves others. But it involves others through who we are. And what we see and what we experience with others is definitely now a very powerful reflection of what we are hiding from ourselves and where we are blind with who we are. And this is, you know, water plays such a profound role in every teaching, because, you know, whether it's baptism in Christianity or the mikvah in Judaism or the sacred waters of Ganga or, you know, purification rituals, all these things are very essential for ourselves to remember that water is not just an element. Water is a symbol of consciousness as well. And, you know, most of our body is water, most of the planet Earth is also water. So it doesn't only symbolize cleanliness, it symbolizes new identity. You know, we can enter water as one person and we come out as a different person. And this is not just some full moon where our emotions are culminating and it's another emotional peak. You know, it's about the death of one identity and the emergence of another. And Pluto is not really, Pluto doesn't want us to abandon who we are, but to see, are we truly alive? Are you truly alive? Or are we just inhabiting something that kept us safe once and we just repeat that loop? And there's a great quote from Manly P. Hall, and he said, "To live in the world without becoming aware of the meaning of the world is like wandering about in a great library without touching the books." And this is very good quote, very good quote. And there's a great story that I want to share with you. Last time I didn't share any story. This is a story about a rabbi, Asik. I think it's Asik, something like that. He was a rabbi and he had a dream that came to him repeatedly about a hidden treasure beneath a bridge in, I think it was in Prague. And one day he decided to follow the dream, and after days of searching, a guard approached him and asked what he was doing. And he was embarrassed and he confessed that he had come because of a dream. And the guard started laughing and said that the dream shouldn't be taken seriously. Why? He said, "I myself dreamed that there was treasure buried beneath the stove of a Jewish man named Isaac." And, you know, imagine traveling all that way because of a dream. So he smiled, he returned home, and he dug beneath his own stove and discovered the treasure exactly where the dream had pointed all along. And this story really shows us something essential about consciousness itself, because, you know, life can send us on a very long journey, because we must become capable of recognizing what has always been there right beneath our feet. So we may go, you know, on the other side of the world just to return to ourselves. That's how we get lost in others many times and get disappointed and feel betrayed and lied and all the stuff that hurt us, only to come back to ourselves. So it was never about them, really, it was about revealing ourselves, our truth, our real selves. And, you know, Pluto strips away many illusions so that we can finally recognize what is within us all along. And there's another great quote from Joseph Campbell that says, "Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. And with this, I would end this forecast. I think it's really appropriate after this story about the hidden treasure that is right beneath our feet. And you know, it doesn't matter if we have to take a long journey. It doesn't matter if we get lost, because everything eventually leads us back to ourselves. But we have to give our part. We have to put conscious effort. We are human beings. So let's start wondering, what does it mean to be a real human being? So, you know, where we stumble, there is our treasure. This is what Pluto here is going to tell us, to show us our weakness so that we can find our treasure. So I wish us all a very transformative, enlightening, luminiferous, ethereal, electrical, magnetic full moon in Aquarius. I love you all and see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.